Good. Well, thank you. Good to be back. As Amir said, the last time I spoke about, the boundaries of Stoke Newington. Today is all about South Hornsey. I'm Tom Hilverkus, and one of my areas of, special interest is the administrative history of London. Obviously, you're all aware, London is divided into boroughs. London boroughs, what was before that? Metropolitan boroughs, what was before that? Well, there's quite a bit of variety in terms of how people governed themselves. And for a lot of these parishes that existed, there's still a lot of boundary markers around. And as I said, it's quite a hobby of mine. So what we're going to cover today in the next 25 minutes, hopefully, is where was South Hornsey. Amir already hinted that, the boundary of South Hornsey was actually behind this building. What's it got to do with Stoke Newington? What's left of it? What was life like? And what happened to it? And what to expect, just a bit of health warning. There's going to be some maps, a lot of maps, and of course some boundary markers. This is actually my favorite map of London. London before the houses, as it was called, London before the Romans. So no houses there, but some traces of civilization, most notably here, Watling Street. Watling Street is, to this day, the boundary of a lot of London boroughs. If you ever looked at a London borough map, you'll see that sort of line. And you may think, that's just an artificial line, but it's not. It's more than 2,000 years old. And equally, the boundaries of Stoke Newington and South Hornsey are, to a certain degree, based on sort of natural features, like, for example, the Hackney Brook River here. But more about that later. Fast forward 1,000 years, the Normans came, divided England into counties. The area where we are today is Middlesex. Middlesex was divided into what's called hundreds. So we were in the Oswaldstone hundred, and the hundreds are divided into parishes. And both Hornsey and Stoke Newington are what we call ancient parishes. So they were sort of formed between 1,000 and 1,300 when the boundaries were sort of fixed and didn't really move anymore. And the last talk I talked about Stoke Newington. You can see if we have a look at London a bit closer here, what it was looking like in the year maybe 1,300, divided into parishes, which was sort of the form of local government. Obviously, a lot of parishes here in the City of London because there were more people. But Hackney, Islington, St Pancras, Shoreditch, they're all ancient parishes. You can see here how the big parish of Hornsey is sort of got a wedge here between Stoke Newington and Islington. And these little bits, you may think, well, what's that? They also belong to Hornsey. They're what's called exclaves. So just a summary of South Hornsey. Already talked about the ancient parishes. And over the years, these parishes became more and more responsibility in managing poor relief, managing streets. And all that sort of continued, and the area where we are today was pretty much, there weren't a lot of people. That all changed, obviously, in the 19th century, and there were sort of a few key events that led to the formation of South Hornsey. Number one, Seven Sisters Road was built, which then sort of formed a very natural boundary. Finsbury Park was developed. Originally it was called Albert Park, I think, which sort of split that little wedge from the rest of Hornsey. And then people started to move in. And Amir, not long ago, had a talk about Albert Town, which was actually built in South Hornsey. And then suddenly people started moving in. And obviously they needed some form of local government. And that's when then in 1865, South Hornsey became their own council, which at the time was called a local board. County of London, we already heard about County of London and their dubious plans of making certain decisions. County of London was formed. Stoke Newington became part of the County of London, but Hornsey remained in Middlesex. So actually what that meant was that there was a county boundary running behind here, this building, for example. In the sort of later years, the local board was then called an urban district, and I'm going to talk a bit about what they were doing. But then, as we all know, 1900, South Hornsey merged with Stoke Newington and ceased to exist. So, where was South Hornsey? You can see here Seven Sisters Road already explained, Blackstock Road, Mount Grove Road, which actually follows the course of the Hackney Brook River, a bit of Clissold Park, and then Green Lanes, and then these exclaves here. So north of Brighton Road, south of Allen Road, which was originally called Albert Town. And that's really a weird patch here. So the houses west of Albion Road, I think. So based on this, who thinks lives in South Hornsey or ex-South Hornsey? Yeah, so, okay. Yeah. Interesting. There's still a lot of boundary markers, and I'm going to talk about them, so remains of street signs and so on. Now let's take a quick look at these funny little exclaves. Exclaves were very common across England or Britain. Usually when an inhabitant of a parish had some fields outside of the parish, they would also become part of the parish. And in this case, this is sort of one of the first surveys, map surveys of Hornsey. It's called the Hornsey enclosure for the whole of Hornsey, which is obviously very large. Sort of shows Newton Green here. This is one of the little patches here, and here's Albion Road, and it shows who the owner is. So we've got here Mrs. Foy and Mrs. Shaw, inhabitants of Hornsey proper, but they had some fields here on some. And that's why they initially became part of Hornsey, and then later, when South Hornsey separated, became a part of South Hornsey. Just another look at this, sort of how they then these detached parts. There's another word for calling it is a detached part, which in turn created a detached part of Stoke Newington. Here's the famous Wiesbaden Road. So Wiesbaden Road, Belgrade Road, Niche Road, whatever. Is actually in Stoke Newington detached. You can see here sort of Brighton Road, between Brighton Road and Palatine Road, there was the boundary. Obviously the 2,000-year-old boundary here, this used to be a Roman road, forms part of it. Albert Town. Yeah, so really bizarre boundary. Because it was bizarre, it also had to be marked. All over Hornsey, you find these very distinct boundary markers. They're all numbered. There's a list of all of them. This one is, and this is also a very old map here of the fields when there was absolutely nothing apart from the old police station was sort of the first buildings and first streets here that were built. This is basically, this is where Beyond Retro is, Ely Food and Wine. So you wouldn't expect that area was part of Hornsey. But yeah, as I said, 1850s, Albert Town was built, and this is sort of from the 1850s, just to show you that these were actually the first areas where houses were built. At one point, the population was probably a little bit higher than Stoke Newington at that point, and really there was a need to administer the area. Now, I already mentioned Stoke Newington was part of London, or before the County of London, we had the Metropolitan Board of Works, which was sort of a loose corporation of the local authorities. There were mainly parishes, and the City of London, of course, in the middle. And you can see here how South Hornsey, or Hornsey at that time, was sticking out. And then the County of London was formed in 1889, all based on the Local Government Act 1888. And then the County of London was created, and what's the first thing they're going to do? They want to take over South Hornsey, and there was a proposal for it to merge with Stoke Newington, actually to create a much larger borough, which should also include sort of the parts around, what's called, up until basically Crouch Hill. So Crouch Hill was supposed to be the natural boundary. It's called a watershed. So almost up to Crouch End. But Middlesex County Council rejected it because what it meant was when you lose people, you also lose tax, which at the time was called rates, but basically sort of the equivalent of council tax. So that didn't happen. Just a quick look at the boundaries again. There are lots of ordnance survey map from the time available on the internet for free, so you can have a look at if you're actually in South Hornsey or not. So you see these two fields again. This was sort of 1890s. It was a dark bold line, which meant a county boundary. So you can actually see where the boundary was. We've got Allen Road here. Here's the Shakespeare pub for reference, and the old field boundary. And you can see here how they sort of build up straight to the field boundaries. On a map from today, all those houses are still there. You might think, well, why did they build this? Why is it not a straight line? It's all based on the original field boundaries, which are many hundreds of years old. This is where we are here, and as I said, and Amir said earlier, the boundary was straight behind here. This, at the time, this wasn't built yet, but you can see here, running up to here where these two fields were connected. So, and the east end of Allen Road then created this detached part of Stoke Newington. This is Newington Green, where it got very special. So, if we have a look, so this is Newington Green here. You've got the Marlmay Club here, for example. So you got Albion Road, South Hornsey, Middlesex in the 1890s. Stoke Newington, dotted line is a parish boundary, Islington. So within a minute, you could have walked across different parishes and even counties. And that was quite confusing because all the parishes had different responsibilities. For example, electricity. Islington had electricity first, as far as I remember. Stoke Newington, I think, was 5 years later. All parishes actually had different voltage. So it's a bit like traveling to America. And it's sometimes confusing. People didn't know where they actually lived. There had to be a boundary survey. Boundary markers had to be put up and so on because the boundaries weren't moving. They always said, well, the boundary's been here for 700 years. It's through your house, and it's going to stay that way because it might need an act of parliament to change the boundary. Okay, well, let's focus on South Hornsey. The district council, or as it was first called, the local board, which was sort of created because, people needed to be governed. There were health concerns at the time, street lining, everything the council had to take care of. But whenever there's change, people are against it. And there's this particular Mr. Whiteman who put this in the papers and was very much against it and wanted a meeting saying here, the Public Health Act, which was one of the acts that sort of created local authorities, which will create this new corporate body of salaried officers at an enormous and perpetual expense. And as corporations have no souls to be saved, nor bodies to be kicked, you will have to remedy against this new tyranny, but must endure a millstone of taxation around your necks, and so on. So the guy was really against it. Probably the same guy who 30 years later then was against the merging with Stoke Newington. A bit about traces, what's left of South Hornsey, and unfortunately there isn't much left. But you can sort of still see it shimmering through here. This is Hilverkus Road, South Hornsey, N1 maybe, I don't know. This is Shakespeare Road, South Hornsey. You might need a bit of imagination to see it. So this is opposite the Shakespeare pub. Here's Shakespeare Road, as it was called back then, I think. Army a few years ago did this mock-up. This is what it looked like. It's just on the boundary with Stoke Newington. Another feature where you can still see it, South Hornsey Local Board, are drain covers. Very exciting. I think this one is on Brighton Road. I don't know where that one is. Still a few around. If you're not sure, over in Stoke Newington, you'll see these drain covers, Hackney Board of Works, as it was called back then, because at that time, Stoke Newington and Hackney formed a union. They split later on, but then obviously in 1965 merged again into the borough of Hackney. So that's what it looks like in lots of other parts of Stoke Newington. South Hornsey also had a town hall, and it was quite a grand town hall, I must say. So really nice. So that's where the council was based in, was it Milton Road? That's what it looks like today. Not so grand anymore. Don't want to offend anyone in case you live there. That's the only thing that left, this tablet here. When the town hall was built, this was put on there. I think members of the board. So you can see here South Hornsey Local Board. This is on Church Street, or just towards Church Street, a bit that was called Paradise Row. This is the new river. Not there anymore, it was filled in. And what do we have here? A boundary marker. Again, the very distinct Hornsey boundary marker. So this is basically Clearside Park, Church Street, and there's still a fence today. I mentioned the list. There's a list of all the boundary markers and where they were. Problem is, a lot of streets have changed their numbers. The numbering has changed, so it's a bit difficult to actually see where it is. Here's another example at Clearside Park, boundary marker 175. Back then, boundary between Hornsey and Islington. Today, still the boundary of Islington and Hackney, obviously. And last year, something incredible happened. After years of only having 4 or 5 boundary markers, known boundary markers, 2 more boundary markers turned up. People, I think, contacted you, Amir, saying they found something in the garden. They weren't quite sure what it was, like a tombstone or so. So we headed over, and we couldn't believe our eyes. We found boundary marker 122, which was also, all the boundary markers are marked on maps, so it's a bit easy to sort of find them. So this is Albion Road. The house, so the street and the neighbours were in Stoke Newington, but the houses were actually in South Hornsey. Here's a list. The South Hornsey Urban District Council kindly published an annual report. Here's one from 1896. Cause of deaths per street, basically. Albion Road, Allen Road. Cause, like someone died on Allen Road, old age. Different reasons here. Don't want to get into it. But here we have all these streets. Some of them may look familiar to you. They were all South Hornsey. Population back then, 16,000. Within 5 years, it went to 17,000. Again, sort of information about who supplied the gas, who supplied the water. Scheduled, it was basically the bin days, right? The rubbish collection or removal of dust, as it was called, was in Albion Road coming on Wednesday, organised by the council, different council to Stoke Newington, which was at that time still called a vestry. Members of the council, very interesting how addresses were displayed back then. So most of these people lived in the area. Albion Road, Milton Road, for example, all were called South Hornsey, but then I think Wilberforce Road Wilberforce Road was in Finsbury Park. Well, they called Finsbury Park. They didn't say South Hornsey. So that I'm always asking myself, well, was there actually an identity? Did people say, well, we are the South Hornsians? But, people in Finsbury Park would probably say, I live in Finsbury Park. South Hornsey then also opened their own library on Blackstock Road. There's actually a very interesting article about that. The public library movement in South Hornsey is available. Hackney history is available on the internet. This is a corner of Blackstock Road and Seven Sisters Road. So this is obviously South Hornsey. This is Islington. And the library was just behind this building. 5 minutes left. So we have to talk about the end, which, South Hornsey didn't last long. Number one, it was quite odd. And there were takeover attempts. And then how County of London was been run for 10 years with all the different vestries and boards. The government wanted to introduce boroughs, metropolitan boroughs, and they had to have a certain size. They had to be bigger, not small. There were some parishes or liberties which were absolutely tiny. So everything had to be in big, large boroughs. So that was one of the reasons. And the second reason was they really wanted to get rid of all the exclaves. South Hornsey wasn't the only one. Another one, famous one, is Clerkenwell had one in Muswell Hill. So Muswell Hill was part of Clerkenwell. And they also wanted to get rid of it. So actually, ultimately, Muswell Hill, I think, was then becoming part of Hornsey in exchange. So the London Government Act 1899 said, well, where the County of London surrounds the detached part of a parish in another county, the detached part shall become part of the County of London. So they had to think, well, what do we do with the rest then? So the two exclaves had to join the County of London. What do we do with Finsbury Park or Brownswood, basically? A lot of people were against it, so there were regularly surveys. Here's one from, can't remember which year that is, 1899. 30 voted for the London Government Bill, 1,817 against it. Similar poll was held in 1894, also very similar. One reason why people didn't want to change was the difference in rates or council tax. So here's a comparison. In some years, the council tax, the rates were actually higher. In other years, it was different. Towards the end, as far as I know, the rates in Stoke Newington were higher. And when South Hornsey actually joined Stoke Newington, those inhabitants were still benefiting from the lower rate for, I think, 10 years. So a lot of people were against it, but that sort of swayed a lot of people to join Stoke Newington. And then we know what happened. Obviously, Stoke Newington was created as a separate borough. There were talks about merging with Hackney or dividing Hackney. There is a very interesting debate. Everything has been documented. Fascinating read of how the MPs argued what to do. Stoke Newington became its own borough, but obviously incorporating South Hornsey. Here's what it looked like in 1900. So all the exclaves have disappeared. South Hornsey is part of Stoke Newington. Still not a lot of people compared to what it should have been, but that was sort of a compromise that was reached and lasted for 65 years. So there was a debate in Parliament. At 7:45, apparently, the councillor sent a telegram to inform the council that they will be absorbed into Stoke Newington. What had to happen was an official inquiry at Town Hall, Milton Road, and that's also a fascinating read in the North London Guardian, sort of documented what happened, all the people who were for it, or the Middlesex County Council obviously was against it because they're losing out on revenue. There's nothing basically they could do. 1st November 1900, the act was effective, and the final meeting of the council was held 7 days later. Now, even after 1900, South Hornsey still existed as what's called a ward. Obviously, like Hackney, Hackney is divided into wards, and every ward basically has one or two councillors. So for a lot of years, South Hornsey was still a ward and had a councillor in the Metropolitan Borough Council of Stoke Newington. Today, absolutely no trace anymore. The wards, as they are called today, are different. Shacklewell, Clissold, Brownswood, and there is no sign of South Hornsey anymore. However, I was once on a flight back into London, and you got these screens of the maps where the plane is, and I was bored, and I sort of zoomed in. Couldn't believe my eyes. South Hornsey, because I zoomed in and say, well, how granular is this? Can I zoom in and find where I live? I saw South Hornsey, right? So I did some research. How did this end up on the British Airways plane map? You can even see here the old boundaries, right? Turns out they use Wikimapia, whatever it's called. So it's sort of an open source map, which I think is also used on Wikipedia. So that is actually, someone must have added it. I have no other explanation, but I'm very thankful for that person adding it and let South Hornsey live on. Is sort of centered where the two fields meet at Allen Road. So according to the internet, this is the center of South Hornsey. And that's basically it. So thank you very much for listening.